Just as an FYI, we in the Zoom world are not able to hear anything in the room.
Can you hear me?
For a brief moment, yes.
Is that how this works? Push the button.
Yeah, you know, we're in that dangerous zone between feedback and.
How horrible for you.
Yeah, somebody had. Yeah, I took a couple trips this year, but not recently.
Suresh, anything?
Yeah, now we can hear you guys.
Okay. And Rebecca, can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, we may have a little bit of feedback, but we'll try to manage it. Sarah seems to be working. We'll have to get Kodiak back here and do a. Yeah. Yeah, we should probably write a recipe card down. Well, all right, everybody. Welcome. Do a quick roll call here. Susan's here, Allison's here, Rebecca's online, Marley, Melody, Kevin, Adam, John. Full house. you probably anticipated that I'll be promoting going on liaison, so you wanted to make one last meeting before we go into an indefinite suspended state. But we'll get to that. So the first item on our agenda should be approval of minutes. Actually, let's take a look. Any attendees? Looks like one. Oh, hi, Monica. So let's accept any comments from the public, which would be you, Monica. If you have one, raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll go on to the agenda. Seeing no hand raised, we'll get into the action items. First action item is consider adoption of the minutes from the January 31 meeting and the April 19th meeting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have a paper from Dave Laredo there about, in response to John Tilley's request that I resign, and I don't know that that ever got into the minutes. So can that be added?
It's really not part of the minutes, but it certainly could be distributed to the members of the
Okay.
panel.
Now,
I just wasn't sure.
I wanted to add that on item 4 in the January minutes, Dave Laredo did address the issue of
Okay.
conflict of interest, saying that the bias exists, the panel does not have adjudicatory authority, and so panel members have the freedom to express their bias. And I think that kind of
Okay, thank you for finding that.
says that
Find that.
in kind of a general way, that addresses both issues.
Unless you're LAFCO, then we're going to sue you over it. Suresh, do you want to screen share from your computer the exhibits that you have?
Sure.
Okay. So moving on to item 2, discussion items.
So do we need to vote on?
Oh,
Minutes?
yes, my bad, my bad. Yeah, we need a motion and a second.
Second.
Okay, and we're in person, so
We
we
will
will,
call because we have a member who's not.
oh, one member out, okay.
That's right.
Panel member Shivani,
Yes.
panel member Kerr. Panel member Lindor,
Here.
panel member Milton,
Yeah.
Minutes
Minutes,
approval.
panel
Oh,
member,
yes.
got it, thank you.
Yes.
Panel member Urquhart,
Yes.
panel member Pinterest,
Yes.
panel member Tilly.
Yes.
January 31 minutes are approved unanimously. Does that, should I include the April 19th in that vote? Sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
so I was just commenting, Kevin, he just got himself appointed to the Carmel Area Wastewater District Board.
There was an overwhelming wave of enthusiasm. I had massive competition.
Yeah, and they have a proposed project called the Bridge to Everywhere, which would tie together a bunch of hiking trails and conceivably connect Point Lobos to Mission Trails Park, which would be kind of cool, except it goes over.
I need an accommodation. I want to learn here and there. Because the other one is
Well,
not working.
Oh, bummer.
I want something louder.
Yeah, okay, my bad. But it's irrelevant to our work at hand here, other than congratulations to Kevin. So with that, we can move on to the discussion items, and Suresh will cover item 2, which is review of basically the revenue and expenditures to date.
Did our vote cover both meeting minutes? I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So can everyone see my screen?
No, you need to enlarge it a little bit.
Better?
There you go.
All right. So apologies for not sending out the exhibits last week. We had some technical difficulties, so we were not able to send it, but it did go out this morning. So there are 3 exhibits. Exhibit A, very simple. This is the water supply charge receipts. What we are showing is the collections through end of April 2023. So on the far right-hand side, you'll see unaudited actuals for 22-23 at a little over $2 million, 59.5% normal for the first collection. Normally, typically, we get the second collection in April. This year, we get the second collection beginning of May. So that's not going to hit until the next set of financials are produced. And then we're also showing the budget for 23-24, which was adopted by MPWMD board on June 20th. And so that also again shows the original budget at 3.4. Collection right now is 0. First collection is going to come in December. However, important to point out here is that even though the entire water supply charge collection is going to be collected, $3.4 million, but we are setting aside the entire $3.4 million in a reserve fund. And they will talk more about the water supply charge in the next item with the MPTA lawsuit. But from a budgetary standpoint, we are showing that we are collecting, but we are not using any revenue from the water supply charge for fiscal year 23-24. All goes into a reserve fund for water supply charge. Next is the exhibit B.
Hang on a second, Suresh, a couple questions. Allison, we'll start with you.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, how often does the water supply charge get collected? You said that we missed one the end of April, but we got it in May. Is it twice a year?
It's
3 times a year.
3 times a year. So you get, just like when you pay your property taxes, you know, most people pay in installments, December and April. And as soon as those are received, the treasurer turns around and then distributes.
So we're on target.
We're on target.
The last one will be a little over $1 million.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's a trailer that when they kind of clean up their delinquencies and some of the payers who pay late finally pay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's been a very predictable revenue source. It's almost always spot on, that close to 3.4 million.
Thank you.
Which, by the way, is why our neighbors next door, Monterey One Water, have expressed a desire to go in that direction. I know you guys probably both have had conversations with Mike McCullough over that issue.
Yeah.
Okay, you got the next one up, Suresh?
Question, Dave?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah, thanks. So Suresh, on the, the deficit, the net revenue over expenses of 1.2, I can kind of see where that would be, the case, but it also seems like it might be 1.2 plus 3.4. The same, this one here.
2B, right?
Yes, 2B.
Thank you.
Yeah, it shows that the deficit is $1.2 million. And that's
Yeah,
almost
as
as
in
if we're
John,
still spending.
the reason why that 1.2 deficit, if you look at just 2 lines above there, the reserve 3.6. So the $3.4 million is going in there. So if you were to take the $3.4 million out of the reserve, meaning you're not setting it aside, you won't have a deficit.
Okay, got it. So it's within that 3.6.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Dave, I'm not able to see the conference room. It's, for me, the video is blanked out. So if there's any questions or raised hands, you'll have to help me with that.
Gotcha.
So exhibit B, if everyone can see the numbers fine. It's maybe a little small, but again, we are reporting through April 30th, 2023, the very last column, highlighted column. Those on the top part are the revenues. Again, the water supply charge collection through April. Then we have the capacity fee. The PWM water sales, we've already billed them 100% now because May and June numbers, we've already delivered 3,500 acre feet of water. So May and June numbers that we are going to be producing are actually going to be the operating reserve, and it's not going to be billed to CalM. So that's why PWM water sales is right on line with the budget amount. Project reimbursements. Basically, all of those reimbursement projects, and those are kind of like, as it happens, we bill as we collect, those are being reported on. Property tax, same thing as the collection of the water supply charge. We get collected 3 times a year. So the first one came in December, second one, like I said, early May, and the third one's going to be towards the end of June, early part of July. User fee, CalM ratepayers, they pay through the bill itself, and so that's pretty much in line. It will exceed what was budgeted. The interest revenue, when we set out the budget about a year ago, or even more than a year ago, interest rates were not as favorable. And so the last 12, 14 months, interest rate has been really favorable. So you can see the change in there, what we had budgeted, what the actual interest income has been. Reclamation project, this is all the administrative fee that we charge to the COD reclamation project for the golf courses. We haven't billed them yet. That gets billed once a year at the end of the fiscal year at the conclusion. So all in all, our budget was $20.4 million. We've collected 17.8 so far. And then on the expense side, scroll down real quick. So on the expense side, we are showing the direct personnel, direct supplies and services. They are kind of like running throughout the year. So through April, we've done 1.2 on the direct personnel, 113,000 on the supplies and services. Legal, 150,000, and then project expenses and project expenses reimbursements. Those two, the big number is because of the PWM water sales, the $12 million included in there. And the detail for that, those two line items, the project expenses are shown kind of like broken out in the bottom part of the chart. Then we have the fixed asset purchases, contingencies. We always like to, budget for some contingencies. Debt service, we are showing 730,000 for the current fiscal year. I'm happy to report that we have actually went out, our board had approved it. And so in May, we have paid out the entire Rabobank loan, or Mechanics Bank loan. So that is paid in full, but that happened in May. Election expense, we won't get numbers until probably towards the end of the year. And then the indirect labor, indirect supplies and services, that's just basically broken out between the direct and indirect. And when the Ordinance 152 committee was set up, there was one of those tasks to do is to make sure that the overhead is maintained within 15% of the collection. And so that's the reason why we had to break out the direct and indirect. And then for reserve, basically just money set aside from the capital projects, the OPEB, the pension. So that's the combination of the 370,000. So $22 million was the total expenses. So far through April, we've done $15.2 million. So you can see our budget had anticipated a deficit of about $1.6 million, but right now we are running a positive balance of 2.5. And that's only because some of these expenses have not materialized. And so there'll probably be a carry forward onto the next fiscal year. If there's any questions on this page.
Yeah, just a couple of additional clarifying comments. So if you look at the first two columns, that's going to be the current budget year that we just entered, July 1. And I just wanted to highlight that the project reimbursements go up significantly to 17.4 million. And that's a vestige of, we need to recognize that we have 2 grants that are coming in on the Pure Water Monterey expansion, roughly in the amount of 17 million. So we're picking up 17 million of that project cost in our project budget. Money comes in, money goes out, it's a wash, but we need to at least recognize it. So we've got 17 million of receipts and expenditures that chances are Monterey One Water is also reflecting in their own budget. But it's because the grants are in our name, we have to be the one that recognizes it. So that's happening in here. And then I think Suresh already pointed out, that's why the reserve at the end is so big, because all of the water supply charge comes in and just sits there, which we'll discuss in the next topic a little bit. Okay.
What's going to be the total debt service for the year?
For the next year, it'll be zero.
No, for this year.
Oh, for this
This
year?
is through April, so we have.
Yeah, Suresh, do you know total debt service?
Yeah, the total debt service was little less than 2.2, 2.150.
Okay.
Then that's with the payoff amount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you expect the interest income to be for the year full on?
So this is through April. Another 2 months would probably be another $20,000, and then we'll have some at the end of the fiscal year. There is going to have to recognize the change in asset value, but without that, probably another interest income of about $20,000.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is Rebecca from the Monterey Division, whatever it is. Suresh, thank you for doing this. Numbers make my head explode sometimes. When we issue grants to the city for various projects, do we have a tracking system or some way of where they follow up and let us know the status of that money that's been expended?
Yeah, it's a great question. And Rebecca, I know you had asked for a list of projects, and I was relying on this table's bottom chart to satisfy that need.
Yeah.
But I can already see you're referring to things like what we call the local water projects.
Yes.
Line. And so you're correct. We've given grants to the city of Pacific Grove for a local water project. The grant we recently gave to the city of Monterey was through our what's called IRWM, or Integrated Resource Water Management Program. And there's a grant there for the Olivier Street dry weather interception and some work at the Lake El Estero. But those local projects, the grant comes as we are invoiced for it. So we receive a series of invoices from the grant recipient, and each grant recipient has a separate project number, a grant number. So we did track all of the, I think we've done 5 local project grants.
Yeah, I actually found them online and
good.
kind of singled out just the Monterey ones. I'll let the Seaside people worry about theirs.
But yeah, we do keep track as a general ledger item in our books.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah, I was only concerned because sometimes I used to do grants all the time, and I know that at the end of a project, there's usually a follow-up that says, this is how we spent your money. But if you have receipts, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and all of our grants have been a portion of the cost. So the total project cost,
right.
There's no residual, let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. That answers my question. Thank you.
All right. So Suresh, you want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. So the next one is Exhibit C. Now, some committee members had desired to just see the water supply charge of revenue against the expenses for the water supply charge. So this is basically what was shown on the previous Exhibit 4B, except this one is just taking the water supply charge as revenue and then seeing how the expenses are factoring against the $3.4 million collected revenue. So as you can see, for 2023 through April, if we had collected $2 million in water supply charge, the expenses of $15.2 million, but that includes the PWM water sales and also some reimbursement projects. So we are showing that revenue sources on the bottom itself, because those are basically wash coming in, coming out. So far through April, end of April, it did have a positive effect. But if you look at the cumulative total on the far right-hand side, you'll see that today, the total, it's about $11 million in deficit. So the point on this chart is basically to say that $3.4 million in water supply charge is not enough to fund the water supply fund. And so what we have been subsidizing it with is basically the property tax, and there's also a portion of the user fee that comes into this fund as well.
Which I think we would agree that Judge Panetta failed to see when examining this whole thing, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yes, and 24 numbers will basically be the same thing, but it'll show water supply charge revenue as 0 because that's not being utilized anymore.
Yeah, Marla, you have a question?
It looks like there is significant public benefit from the water supply charge. What is the future of those public benefits? Do you know?
Well, so the public benefits, to date have been the expansion of the ASR program, the pre-funding of all the district's portion, so 75% of pre-construction costs on Pure Water Monterey and the Pure Water Monterey expansion. And then we offset the costs of our people who are out doing the water quality sampling and so forth. So it's, we'll have to find the money elsewhere because our financial position is pretty strong, pretty secure in terms of reserves. I think last time I looked, we could grow out of the water supply charge, meaning giving up that 3.4 million in about a 4 to 5 year period. So, the decision to sunset the user fee, which is something we've also talked about, because eventually, if you do a percentage on an ever increasing base, which is the CalAm revenue requirement, then we'll be receiving an ever increasing revenue stream that we don't have reasons for. So we do plan to back off on the user fee as well at some point. It may just be that point's further in the future because we need to now make up the water supply charge. That $11 million of deficit, that's real capital that and real people that we've spent. So it just came from elsewhere. But it's, I think that the judge in her reading of our position, just defined available differently than we defined available. The money spent on other projects is not available to spend on a project over here. And it's not double collection and double expenditure because you can't spend $2 to buy the same candy bar. You spend $1.
That was last year.
Yeah. So anyway, it's I would say it has an impact. It hurts a little, but we're in a position where we can grow out of it. And that's what we'll do.
Can I go back to 2B for a second?
Yep.
I just had a question about the Los Padres long-term plan. What does that cover? Because I also saw this in the newspaper about a negative declaration
So
and construction beginning.
that negative deck is for, there's some valves that
Oh, okay.
water out.
So this is not about the big plan that you
Right,
guys have
yeah.
come up with. Okay.
We don't move that fast.
That's
on
what I was
$190
worried
million
about.
expenditure, yeah.
Okay, so what does that exactly cover, the
Yeah, so-
long-term plan?
So the long-term plan evaluated maybe 7 alternative projects, then got it down to 5, then landed on 4.
Okay, I've seen the.
Yeah,
I've
and it's
seen the.
available on our website.
Mhm. So that's what that was for?
Right. And-
Okay.
And so it's out there now. The next steps in that plan probably are a year away from even talking about.
Okay,
So,
because what concerns me is ultimately this is going to turn into a ratepayer cost. So I don't know when that's coming, but it's something I'd like to keep an eye on.
yeah, I have a call this afternoon at 3:30 with a reporter who wants to know what's the next step, who's going to make that decision, and how soon is that decision going to be made? And pretty much to everyone I've said, let us absorb new water supply first before taking on another
That makes a lot of sense.
multi-$100 million project.
Okay,
And ratepayers' backs.
well, thank you for clarifying that for me.
But there's going to be a fish regulator somewhere who says, if you're not taking it down or fixing it, what are you doing on behalf of the fish? And then that fish passage piece becomes a hot potato to talk about. So it's not like this is just going to go away and sit on a shelf. At some point, somebody's going to say, what are you gonna do?
Action's coming.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Dave.
Sure. Any other questions? Great. Suresh, thanks. Yep.
One of the unforeseen consequences, perhaps it was foreseen but not discussed, was of the dam removal, the first one, was that the Carmel River bottom went up.
It's higher.
So people suffered flooding because of that.
And there would be more of the
There would
same.
be more of the same. Is there any way to prevent that?
Well, you do try to sequester existing sediments, but, you know, that dam is still acting as a stop point. You take it out, you're going to get more sediments. And, you know, some of the sediments that landed in Paso Hondo in 2017 have worked their way down. What we're seeing is the river bottom, and you've seen this, is actually scoured deeper in the lower half of the river. And so abutments that used to be fully covered in soil, like at Rancho Cañada, actually right near the lagoon, there's an underground pipe that's now fully above ground. Yeah, the cod pipe, cod board member, you have to deal with that one.
That's right. I think it got a little more sediment and went down, got covered a little better.
Well, I'd like it to, because when it's partially covered, it creates some class 3 rapids right after the pipe. But when it's below the pipe, you run the risk of scour underneath and actually having a spill. But yeah, it'll be a problem if the dam is removed. The sediment behind the dam will have to find a home. So there'll be major expense in moving it. You know, one of the theories is you can find a valley up near some winemaker in Kashawa and fill it and create more arable soil to grow grapes on. Win-win. But it's, yeah, it's just a huge liability that I think should remain a liability for another 5 to 10 years before addressing it, because we need to take on water supply. There's some rate-making things that are happening in the current rate case that are probably going to be of interest to the public. And it's just not time to take on, you know, pick your poison, 100 million or 190 million.
Would it have been, if it were to be taken down, would it be another situation where Cal-Am takes it down and profits hugely from it?
That would be the model that they would push forward with, which is another reason we want to just relax, because, you know, right now we're paying about $7.5 million a year for San Clemente.
For the dam that doesn't exist.
Yeah. So
Among 48,000 right there.
yeah,
Yeah, so do your math.
it's a big number.
It's a chunk. That's one of the reasons your water bill's big. Just to comment on, I put them up, that it takes the modeling that was done before Dave got here when they originally all the planning, that, and modeling is modeling, it's not reality, it's modeling. Said it took 27 to 42 years, if I'm remembering the numbers off the top of my head right, for the particles to clear the river. And that would all depend on whether it started with a high flow year like this year, or whether it started in a dry year. Start dry takes longer, start wet goes faster. So rivers are dynamic. And they'll come to a new normal over time, you know, whatever that is. And we're not there yet.
But in 2017, all the Paso Hondo folks were like, we didn't flood in 98. We didn't flood in 95. Those were bigger flows. What happened? You raised the base of the river. So it overtops its banks. All right, Suresh, thank you for that update. Shifting further in the agenda, we go to Item 3, which is your bailiwick.
The status of the MPTA lawsuit, this is MPTA 2. The case challenging the water supply charge and whether or not Ordinance 152 required it to be sunset had its last status before Judge Panetta in June. There was no substantive change to her ruling And that ruling has become final. The district did lodge their notice of appeal, and the long, slow grind through the appellate court has begun. The next step in that is actually that the local court puts together its trial record and transfers that to the appellate court. The appellate court then signals when they've received it, and then that starts the timeline for the briefing process. The Superior Court takes quite a while to actually transfer the file, so it'll be a month or more before that actually then is fully lodged for action in the appellate court. That doesn't fully resolve all matters before the trial court. There, as the prevailing party, Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association would be entitled to a claim for attorney's fees. And there is a time period for which they have to file a motion to claim attorney's fees. And there's a process whereby if there's an agreement as to what the amount of fees would be, then there's a process by which that can be challenged. So there have been discussions between the district's litigation counsel and the Taxpayers Association counsel as to the amount of fees. We're narrowing in. We don't yet have a settlement on that amount, but it appears that it's going to be in the neighborhood of $400,000, which is less than the Taxpayers Association's counsel had wanted, but it's more than the district had originally offered. But the point being, though, that if it's very difficult to economically challenge the recovery of fees, because as the prevailing party, there can be a claim for the effort to defend against the challenge. So you're both paying for the challenge and then paying for the defense of the challenge, and that accounting does not add up easily unless there's some clear error. Usually it's in the party's interest to cause a settlement. And we've had productive discussions with MPTA. The board has not yet had an opportunity to weigh in on the final settlement of that. Now, that doesn't mean that it would be a settlement and payment of the fees until this matter winds its way through the appellate court. And it would only be if MPTA is the prevailing party after the matter is heard on appeal and then remanded back to the trial court. So what the discussions at this point would be is that if in fact fees are warranted, what would those fees be? So it's not conceding the fees at this point.
What is the potential refund?
It'll be likely in the neighborhood of $400,000 in today's dollars. That would be adjusted over time if and when the matter is remanded back to the trial court. And we're looking at probably at least 12 months, more like 18 months, and perhaps even 24 months before it gets back to the trial court. So, but we're just talking in terms of today's dollars. Want to remind everyone that there's actually a second MPTA lawsuit. This was the challenge to the district's implementation of the sunset clause, because it was possible that the Taxpayers Association did not put the claim in entirely the right format. In an abundance of caution, the Taxpayers Association filed another lawsuit. Actually, technically, it's the third challenge, and that's characterized as a reverse validation action. If in fact MPTA is the prevailing party in this case, it's likely that that reverse validation action will be nullified because it would seek the same end. It's possible not. There may be some independent basis for that. We've been in discussion with MPTA to postpone the need to hear that case until we have clarity on the matter before the appellate court. So we're a stipulation to stay that next action until we know, in fact, what comes out of the appellate court and whether or not there's a need to litigate that. But that would be an independent basis to challenge the continued collection of the water supply charge. I'll be happy to respond to any questions.
So am I understanding you correctly in that there's been 2 determinations, yet we're appealing, and that could take anywhere from 12 to 24 months?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Did we,
Before it comes back to trial,
Well,
if it comes back.
you know, the appellate court's a wondrous place. You never know what you're going to get. The appellate court could go ahead and resolve it one way or the other. More likely, it would return it with direction to the trial court for the trial court to then implement it or to reopen the matter in some way in accord with the appellate court's determination.
Thank you.
and did we confirm that their fees were 100% contingent?
Yes, we have. That was one of the questions is, were they on a contingency basis? And we have made that inquiry and we have affirmed that.
And if it were to come back to the trial court, or when it does, is it the same judge?
Yes, yes. Once a judge exercises decision-making authority over that, unless there's a change in the judge or some external factor, that's the judge owns that case for all purposes.
Any other questions, comments on that?
So stay tuned. We'll be talking about this more.
Stay tuned. Yeah, so as I mentioned, you know, our user fee is 8.325% of the water charges on a CalAm bill. The local water charges are slated to go up about 20% over 3 years. The revenue requirement or the total receipts are about 70 million. So that's how we start to look at growing out of the water supply charge.
One other aspect, that the existing order of Judge Panetta does not directly discontinue the collection of those monies, but the district is going to sequester the funds that are received until we understand what happens on appeal.
Dave, what was that, 8 point what percent of the calendar?
8.325.
Is that at all levels? In other words, it's not a percentage of the bill? For
It's a
different
percentage
tiers?
of the, right, it'd be your total fixed meter charge plus volumetric charges.
So it varies, the percent would vary
Depends
depending on your
on
tier.
the customer, yeah.
So it's 8.3,
To 5% of the revenue received from your volume and meter charge combined. So like if you were to look at a bill, you could actually do the math. You'd see our number and you'd see the sum of
okay.
your water usage and your meter charge, and it should track as a percentage.
8.35.
Yeah.
John had a question or a comment.
Mr. Laredo, where will that trial physically take place?
I'm sorry, where?
The appeal court?
Yeah.
That's in San Jose.
Uh-huh.
And so it's likely to be held, it's in the 6 districts, so it will likely be held there. They do sometimes travel, but they do at times, usually about once a year, they actually hold argument in Monterey or in Salinas. We won't know until we actually have, there's a lot of work to be done yet. The file needs to go to the appellate court. The appellate court needs to set a briefing schedule. As the appellant, the district will brief first, then MPTA will have an opportunity to do their brief, and then the district will brief last. Then it sits in a black hole for a while. And when the justices then feel that it's ready to be set for oral argument, they will provide a date, oral argument, and then once again, it will sit there. Ostensibly, they need to come out with a final determination within 90 days of the matter being submitted. My understanding is that appellate judges need to sign an affidavit that they have no matters pending on 90 days before they can actually get their paycheck. But even members of the Supreme Court that had signed that same document never missed a paycheck, but had matters that were apparently submitted for more than 90 days.
Thank you.
It's also one of the weirdest courts you'll ever see because it's like the fourth floor of a normal
The
business building.
yeah.
And then you go in, like you'd be going into somebody's office and they built a dais for the judges to sit in. But there's nothing ornamental outside the building like a courthouse would. It's weird.
In the past budget, though, they did
Yeah, I think they might
appropriate
put one
funds
in
for-
Palo Alto or somewhere else. Yeah.
for construction. I'm hopeful that we get to go to the old court, not the new court, only because I don't know how long that's going to take them to build.
Yeah. Okay, ready to move on from that one?
Just make sure that we ask if there's any public comment.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for keeping me honest. Members of the public, any questions on that agenda item number 3? Or 2, since we passed by you?
Seeing none?
Seeing no hands, we will move on to item 4. The water supply project update, not a whole lot to comment on other than the bids are in and on Pure Water Monterey expansion. It was 2 bid packages, one on the injection well site and one on the advanced water purification site. Both came in within the expected budget, so that was a shock because of the current environment we're in where everything costs more. So that'll get awarded hopefully July 31st by Monterey One Water. Then once they mobilize, the project manager will have a better sense of what the construction calendar is going to look like. It should be a 2-year build, give or take. So we'll learn what the schedule really looks like. The goal for us is to allocate the new water. So there's a portion of the expansion is to offset existing needs, and a portion of the expansion is what we would deem to be new water. We'll take a portion of the new water, allocate that to the 6 cities and the unincorporated county and the airport and the military branches. So that allocation process is expected to take about a year, 10 months to a year, so midway in the construction. The lifting of the cease and desist order is something, this is one where John and Adam, I'll be coming to the business interests because it's in their interest to, even if you just want to play along, you can say, I don't believe there's enough water here in this expansion. I think we need a desal plant. You can harbor all those notions, but desal's not coming for probably 5 to 7 years, best case, if everything lines up, and there's a lot of things that could not line up correctly. This is the one chance we have to lift the moratorium. So we'll be coming to the business community looking for partners at about that same time, 10 to 12 months from now. And then we'll use the final year of completion of the project to get the State Water Board up to speed so that they're prepared to lift the CDO. We have been told that they really don't want to get into the supply and demand numbers of the community, that they'd sure like it if the PUC would resolve that issue. It is an issue in front of the PUC, so they'll either resolve it to our liking or we'll continue to fight whatever they come up with to push for the expansion being sufficient water to get the State Water Board out of our kitchen here on the peninsula as soon as possible. So anyway, that's the things we're doing in that 2-year construction period, allocation and the groundwork for the lifting of the CDO. And so hopefully we're ready.
Does this first phase of new water deal with the stranded lots of record issued for people, or?
Well, so it will. You still can't get a meter with the meter moratorium, so we have to get the CDO lifted.
CDO, right?
Yeah. The legal lots records, this is, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but when supply and demand was projected on behalf of the desal project decision in 2018, the way the future needs were estimated were how much did we use the last 5 years? And then kind of expanded that to the last 10 years, but it was originally, how much do we use the last 5 years? That's where we stand today. And then how much do we need for legal lots of record? They didn't count people, they didn't count population. They let the legal lots of record be the proxy for future population. Same with commercial lots. And at the same time, they said, well, Pebble Beach build out, that's going to be a proxy for people. As soon as we shifted to looking at third-party forecasts, AMBAG forecasts, the people are part of the forecast. And so now you project residential customer demand based on people and commercial customer demand based on job starts as a proxy for commercial growth. So the way it was done to size the plant was done, you know, with some wild guess of the legal lots of record, which was almost at that time 17-year-old data. So we just got better data now, but part of this phase 2 process in front of the PUC to resolve what is the supply and demand numbers is the competition between that data set and the new data set, and you know, how many times can one person use the same water? You know, do I get to count it 3 times for my lot, for my people, and for my house? You know, so on the desalination side, there's still a strong measure afoot to by CalAm to get it permitted and meet the conditions of the Coastal Commission permit. That includes having to get an outfall agreement negotiated. I've seen Monterey One Water's estimate for time, and it's about 5 years and significant investment of dollars to even get to the point of building the facilities that would be needed to mix the brine and so forth. And so there's issues there. There's issues surrounding the old PUC decision and so forth. So a lot of this is just kind of stumbling out over time. We don't really have a good read on it. And then ASR is, we did not have the year we wanted. Some of you know that, some of you don't. It was still better than the average yield, but you know, we, the district, are now pushing for just a faster pace of play by CalAm to build the redundancies that they need so that we can use the injection wells the way they were intended to be used. You know, that we, even with the number of good days that we had this winter, which means ignore all of the bad things that happened in the valley with flooding and pump stations not ready and a big source well going out. And you ignore that, you just look at the good days that we had. We gave up about 400 acre feet more that if we just had the other injection wells here in Seaside. So they're all rectifiable. So we're trying to just encourage CalAm to get moving. The Sand City desal plant needs a new source water well. It's just the same point. They need to get moving. They're about a year and a half behind on that. And CalAm, the they is CalAm in that case, because they'll build for Sand City. So they have a lease with Sand City. Sand City owns the project. Sand City did not want to undertake the expenditure to get a new well. CalAm agreed that they would do that as part of their normal well rehabilitation. But when you look at firm supply between now and when Pure Water Monterey expansion is done, what we have is Pure Water Monterey base, the river, and Seaside Basin. Those are your firm supplies. And that's about about 8,300 acre feet. And demand is about 9,600 acre feet. So that 1,300 acre feet difference comes from the Sand City desal plant, which one would think you need to be motivated to make sure it gets as much water as it can. Comes from aquifer storage and recovery, where right now we've got about 3,000 acre feet in the ground. So, ostensibly more than a 2-year shortfall. And then comes from little dribs and drabs elsewhere. Any underpumping by certain pumpers in the Seaside Basin gets reallocated to Cal-Am and Seaside Muni, and the Malpaso water right, if underutilized, goes to the benefit of customers. So for the next 2 years, while they're building out the expansion, every year they have to find 12 to 1,300 acre feet from these other less firm sources. And so that's what's going on.
I see that you've used the figure of 1,300 acre feet for ASR production going forward. Is that from that 3,000 acre feet you just referenced?
No, so the 3,000 is what's in storage now.
Yeah.
Again, the way ASR works is supposed to work is you look at your weather cycles. We've got 120 years worth of data. And I think in our particular case, we use a 40-year or 35-year segment of that data. And you say, well, if rain repeats itself, whether it's in this order or I reorder all the years, but I've got several decades worth of data that includes representative years. So you can have some dry years, some really wet years, and so forth. That cycle will produce enough water that goes into storage when it's wet and comes out of storage when it's dry, that the average yield would be 12 to 1,300 acre feet. So in this year, we got 1,656 acre feet, which is pretty good. In 2017, we got 2,345 acre feet, which is pretty good. 2021 and 2020, about 66 acre feet. So the idea is, make hay when the sun shines or whatever.
Or when the rain comes.
Is to, maximize your wet years, put it in the ground. So this year we could have had 2 years worth of 1,300 acre feet. About 2,600 is what we should have been able to do. But there, as I said, the pump station wasn't ready till February, and the Pierce well went out, and there's not enough redundancy. So the system wasn't robust enough to cover for certain outages and things like that. And that's, when decisions got made, hey, can you dial back injection in ASR so we can keep our tanks high enough to have fire flows over here? And so we did that. That's part of the communication thing. But if we don't get all the redundancy that's needed, then we're going to have to downsize ASR, because operations are not keeping up with the availability of the weather. And that's a problem that's proven out now 2 good years in a row. And then you don't think about it during drought years, because it's like, oh, what can we do? There's no water to inject. And then you get another wet year, and it's like, darn it, didn't we say last wet year we were going to get these things fixed? So,
what's the capability or the capacity of ASR? If we were able to capture everything.
in the absolute wettest year,
Yeah.
About 23 acre feet a day, which should be over 5,000 acre feet.
Wow.
You're never going to see that. Because in our best years, it's come out to about, well, right now, because we don't have access to what's called the Monterey pipeline, the large diameter pipeline, our constraint is the pipeline that we do have, which comes up through Tehama and down through Montero. And it has a much smaller diameter, like 12-inch, something like that. And so the most we can do, if we have all the injection wells ready for us, is about 18 acre feet. So you're giving up, let's say 5 per day, and you get about 180 days available.
Is there any consideration to build more ASR wells in addition to what is there, and that would
Yeah,
increase
it's
a
an interesting
possibility?
question, because now that CalAm's managed to live within their legal right on the river. See, it used to be when they relied on more pumping from the river to expand ASR capacity means more pumping from the river.
Right.
And you run up against the water treatment constraint in the throughput of what's called the Begonia iron removal facility.
Okay.
And so there would be a theoretical limit as to how much water you could push through. But now that they're down to their legal right, there's more capacity there. So you could put
Okay.
in, another couple of wells over in the Carmel River area to maximize ASR.
Okay. So that's a
The Monterey
possibility.
Pipeline was sold as being able to be bidirectional.
Right, I remember.
Yeah. Right now, the company's saying, no, we can't do that with pure water Monterey water. We need it year round. But there are regimes where you could go January and February and shut it down in one direction, move water from the
Right,
river.
the other way.
But you'd be taking pure water Monterey water and storing it. The company has preferred to get instant revenue recognition by taking pure water Monterey that we deliver them on the first of the month, and trying to sell all of it or extracting it to get into the customer rate base within a month. So their balance of storage of pure water Monterey in the ground at any one time is just tens of acre feet. It's
Wow.
not significant. So if you wanted to run it differently with access to the Monterey pipeline, you'd actually just have to store your winter pure water Monterey water, rely more heavily on Carmel Valley water, which supposedly you'd be in a position to do because now it's raining and you would have table 13 water rights that you only get in wet periods.
Wet years.
But it's somebody's huge spreadsheet problem that you might be able to solve it on a spreadsheet, but then there's other pressure issues and there's zones throughout the system. And we are not the operator, so we're not privy to all of the nuances.
Okay,
But in theory,
it's
I
possible.
could draw up the spreadsheet, but in practice, CalAm does not want to do it that way.
Right, because it's not as profitable, probably.
I don't know what it is, but they did sell the Monterey pipeline as bidirectional. And we're
Right.
not doing that. And haven't since 2020 when we brought pure water online.
Is all of the new vineyards and things coming in Carmel Valley affecting the water supply issue for
Yeah.
that area?
Yeah, so we have about 3,500 to 4,000 acre feet of non-CalAm pumping. And we need to go back and look at that to see how realistic that number is. Every year when we do the water supply budgets, and we think it's gone up, but it was, and we keep track of it all. So at some point we'll make a decision, but it's not gone through the roof.
Okay,
It's, but, sometimes you look up there and you'll see new vineyards going in, but they're on fractured rock wells. And so they're not really competing for the same water
okay.
from the Carmel River. It's the folks up near Kashawa, there'll be marijuana grows that'll pop up, outdoor grows, not legal,
Right.
greenhouse grows. And, our guys will find a PVC pipe pulling water from the river.
Wow.
And so, but these aren't huge, when you aggregate them up, it's not really gonna tip the needle. It is gonna affect us because, we've had environmental mitigation measures for 40 years, 30 years, call it, that we really now, at this point, if we go 5 years and CalAm stays within its limit on the river, then the river should look different. And so we need to come up with some sort of monitoring plan. And if we do that, we'll end up focusing more on these non-CalAm pumpers to figure out what their impact is.
Yeah, and is there an impact from runoff from those vineyards into the river in terms of pesticides or
Yeah.
that kind of stuff that may affect the water quality eventually?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one's way uphill, probably not, but.
But COD is now connecting up to Carmel Valley Manor, and so we'll be taking all that septic out of the valley, which should have a beneficial impact to the river conditions.
Good, okay.
Dave, I have a
Thank you.
question. What happens to Cal-Am if they are short 12 to 1,300 acre feet for the next 2 years? What's the penalty and who pays it?
Well, so
What's their motivation
that's a
here?
planning number. So it's not like, when they were not wanting to participate in the expansion of Pure Water Monterey, this was a burning question, because before this winter, we had 2,000 acre feet in storage, not 3,000. And actually, it was more like 1,700, 1,600. And you don't get Table 13 rights if it's not raining. And Sand City desal's not really been chugging along the way it should. And so we were starting to look at this going, how are you going to get through the third year if it doesn't rain? Because you're going to use up every drop of stored water. We got a 2-year build on this thing. Quit dragging your feet. Let's go. So now we're in that position where we've actually increased our stored water supplies. We've got the project.
So they just use
done.
that up. They'll just use up the stored water
Now,
rather than building the AS.
At the time, they were asking for, what was the term they were looking for the administrative, they wanted to reopen the decision. Yeah. Anyway, they filed to reopen the decision in December.
Which decision?
So the decision that said you should move forward with Pure Water Monterey expansion, they said, oh, we're not prepared to sign the water purchase agreement. We want you to rehear this thing, application for rehearing. Oh, there we go. That's when we started to get nervous, because we're like, well, we thought we were all on the same page, that they wanted to go ahead and do this as supplemental water. They weren't admitting that it's the final increment of water. But we knew that it needed 2 years to get there, and we only had a 2-year supply. So and they said, well, if we can't get this done and we don't sign the water purchase agreement, we'll just pump more from existing supplies in the Seaside groundwater basin, which
I
is
remember that, yeah.
code for overpumping.
Overpumping, yeah.
Right.
Groundwater basin. And the other two suggested things were one that required our approval that they weren't going to get, and one that required the regional board's approval that wasn't going to happen, to get more water out of the existing pure water project.
So now that they have access to this 3,000 acre feet, there's really no motivation for them to build the new wells that should be extracting Pure Water Monterey, right?
There's motivation.
Is there? Are they acting on it? Are they?
Yeah.
I mean, how long does it take to build a well?
Less than a year. Yeah. I sense your frustration. So last item, anybody in the public have a question? There are no members of the public left, so perfect.
I just have one additional question. I really appreciate you walking us through all of that. What I heard was there could be allocation of new water for cities in a year.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that tied to lifting the cease and desist? That
Yeah, so
quite makes sense to me.
it doesn't.
Okay.
So
You're not irrationally confused.
we'll say Delray Oaks wanted to do new development in that triangle parcel. You need a meter. You're never going to get a meter until the cease and desist order is lifted. But let's say Delray Oaks wanted to do a bunch of fourplexes or ADUs where there's an existing meter on site. Our permitting shouldn't hold you up. The lack of being able to set a meter is going to hold you up. So what we'd like to be in a position to do, we don't want to put water into people's hands that are going to start using it before we flip the switch on the expansion. So we think that if we get a year from completion of the expansion, then projects that come through for a water permit are very likely a year from completion. So we would go ahead, and this all depends on what our board decides, but our recommendation to our board is going to be start making prospective allocations as soon as a year from today, so that then people can get started on projects with the end in sight, but only for metered sites.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Question? If a person has a meter, but they're using all the water they're entitled to, and they want to build an ADU, is it possible to avoid them more water for their meter?
That's where this idea of prospective allocations, so if you're in the county, you'd be going to the county asking for a water release form, but they should have in their little pocket, their new bucket of water in about 10 months to a year from now. And then we would encourage them to let water from that bucket out if you've got a metered project. So if you're doing an ADU and you're passing it through your meter and it's a non-subdividable parcel, so that ADU wouldn't become a separate home, then we let you sub-meter the ADU so that all you would be doing is going to the county and saying, I need 0.068 acre feet for an ADU. And they'd say, yeah, good news, we have water. We'll sign your water release form. But as I said earlier, we don't want to approve projects that are going to get finished before the expansion gets finished, because then it's exacerbating that shortfall that we have, even for a short period of time.
Interested in having additional VIVO type arrangements to produce more revenue to operate different services people receive. Where do those fit into the picture?
Those fit into a political fight that I'm staying out of. So, I'll be honest with you. We think that 90% of the ADUs that we've seen are intended solely for the benefit of the homeowner, for people coming to visit, people staying, not a true ADU. There are now, we're seeing some, especially from Seaside, where they've got kind of a standard package. Here's your ADU package. Those are, people are going to try to rent them. But we've seen some ADU proposals come through, like in Carmel, and it's like, it's a guest house, come on. But there are folks who are house rich and cash poor in Carmel, Pebble, and elsewhere that really would like to build an ADU, move into it, and then rent their main house for long-term rentals, not short-term rentals. But the chances are somebody at some point will try to, do VRBOs in their ADUs until they're caught, just like PG had to go through and get online and, hey, look, these are unlawful second rental units.
I have one more question, and I don't know if it's appropriate for this meeting, but I looked at the water quality report for Cal-Am, and then Jan Schreiner had a comment about it, because on page 19, they talk about PFAS monitoring. They're fairly high rates, and she made the comment that PFA chemicals have been in the news. Public agencies, the Army had to clean them up for Marina Coast.
Yeah.
But because Cal-Am's a private company, they're not required to. So do you know the status on that? Because these seem like high rates.
They've got a couple of wells in Seaside, but I can't really say this is on our agenda.
Yeah, it's not, so.
Might be an item to go on a future agenda, but yeah, they've detected PFAS in a couple of wells in the system. John?
You referenced earlier the phase 2 of the CPUC, the demand and supply report. Do you expect that to be forthcoming?
I don't know, there's been some communication on it just last week, I think it was, where Caroline's outside counsel said we'd like to get started on this, and City of Marina Coast, and I think even ourselves said, wow, I don't even remember this. We may want to rethink hearings, and the judge came back and said, okay, it looks like you think you might need 2 weeks of hearings. Here's some dates that might work. So something's gonna happen here shortly. But
I thought those hearings were on the general rate case. Wait, I am now confused.
It is general rate case hearing dates that were just issued.
oh, that was the general rate case. Okay,
Don't
so-
do that to me, Dave.
So my bad.
No.
So the request for whether we do need more hearing time on the phase
that's-
2 is still
It's in limbo.
percolating.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
out there in the air.
Yeah. But I think the point that was made by the city of Marina was, we haven't heard from the PUC on this topic in almost a year, I think,
Mhm.
or more. So what we all agreed upon back then in the scoping meetings and so forth are kind of irrelevant. Let's reopen it.
What we've asked for is a renewed status conference,
Yeah.
so we can all figure out where are we.
So the last item on future meetings is, because we're not going to have expenditures of the water supply charge, we're not going to have administrative overhead allocable and limited on the water supply charge. Do you want to suspend meetings until the appellate court rules on the appeal?
Kind of makes sense, huh?
I think given that we've, transitioned back to in-person meetings mostly, to have to give up time of your day to, there's other ways to follow the water gossip, and I'm committed to meet with any of you on those issues.
Can we just have a water gossip meeting?
Yeah, water gossip Zoom.
Yeah. But, so, okay, I think we'll take that recommendation forward, because, while the water supply charge exists and the ordinance exists, then the charge of this committee still exists. I don't think it's something we as a district or our board would just want to unilaterally do without consent, so.
Should we vote on that?
Do you need to
Do we need to vote on that?
Yeah, I think that would be great. So I guess the motion would be to suspend meeting and operation of this committee until such time as the appeal of the Taxpayers Association is resolved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Susan, we'll let you have that one. And roll call.
Dave, could we add like something, just a catch-all at the end of that, so it's not just based upon one particular fact, or it's felt,
Yeah.
just to leave it opening?
Yeah, let's just say because of the appeal of the case, giving us no oversight requirements until it's resolved, I guess.
They could be, you could have perhaps a reason to meet upon the call of the chair.
Yeah.
So
I'm
if
fine
someone,
with that friendly amendment.
so if somebody felt that there was a need to meet for whatever reason, to contact the chair
Next
to
week.
persuade that the
There you go.
meeting be held.
All right, Sarah, roll call.
Councilmember Tilly,
Yes.
Councilmember Patriot,
Yes.
Councilmember Urquhart,
Yes.
Councilmember Kozlowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Melton. Yes. Councilmember Indoor,
Yes.
Councilmember Kerr. Yes. Councilmember Shabazz. Yes. Motion passes.
All right,
Unanimously.
and that leads us to adjournment. And outside of this committee meeting, anybody have any other questions? I'll give you 10 minutes to. All right.
You saw the King of Jordan